This week you're going to find out that the Game Boy Camera did way more than just take low resolution selfies in 4 shades of green. As we usually do here at Hoof Gaming, cast your mind back, and I mean way back. Back to a time before everybody had a digital camera on their mobile phone. Actually, before everybody even had a mobile phone, and even before standalone digital cameras had become widespread. Now, as hard as all that is to believe, in 1998 that was very much the way things were. Portable gaming was still pretty big though. Almost 10 years after its initial release, the Game Boy was in the midst of a second wind thanks to the gargantuan success of Pokemon. And this was also the year that Game Boy Color was released, the long-awaited colour version of the Game Boy that wasn't quite the evolution that we wanted, but was still very much welcome. But before all that came the Game Boy Camera, known as the Pocket Camera in Japan. This tiny plastic cartridge with a ball on top held the record for the world's smallest digital camera in the 1999 edition of the Guinness Book of Records. The box contents are pretty simple, consisting of just the Game Boy Camera and its related instruction manual and safety warnings. Honestly, using the Game Boy Camera is just so simple and fun, you probably don't even need to watch this video. But please, carry on watching anyway. Setting up this camera is as simple as inserting it into the cartridge slot of your Game Boy. Now these days camera phones switch between front and back cameras with a tap of a button, but this more rudimentary device requires you to swivel the camera itself to choose between standard shots and selfies. The Game Boy Camera's built-in software is very weird indeed, and that much is true from the moment the title screen hits. It is a glimpse of the crazy style that would later be represented in Nintendo's WarioWare series, and it arguably started right here. 3 simple menu items greet you after that: shoot, view and play. However, before doing that you can press start to change a few settings and look at some stats. Here you can change your username, birth date and view your Game Boy Camera's unique ID, and pressing start will also allow you to change these details as well. Record will show you how many pictures you've taken, how many have been deleted, transferred to other Game Boy cameras, received from other Game Boy cameras or printed out. And you can view high scores for all of the Game Boy Camera's mini games, more on those in a minute, and view the credits, which aren't really credits at all at this stage, but just an animation of a man dancing. Shoot is of course where you get to take your pictures, but there is a lot more to do than just pointing and shooting. Well, I guess it is in the shoot option where you can take a quick picture but also change the brightness and contrast settings. But even then you can press the select button for a little sub menu that gives you a few more options. You can flip the image horizontally or vertically, there's a dither option to change how smoothly the transition between shades are, and even change the palette to invert the colours or mess around with the 4 shades of green or black that are available to you. Finally, you can use the shutter option to change the sound that plays when you take a picture. All of them are equally horrible, so you could just use this option to turn them off, and you probably will. Each time you take a picture you can choose to save it to your album with the A button or discard it with the B button. Simple really. But once you've taken a few snaps and you want to see what you've got in the can, you can go to the check menu and see all of the shots you've taken. You can browse them at your leisure, and when you select them with A you'll be given a new submenu. This one gives you a frame option in which you can choose from several borders to find the perfect one for your art. There's a comment function where you can write a short caption for your photo, and a delete option which does exactly what it says on the tin. If you have the Game Boy printer, a thermal printer peripheral, you can select the print button to commit your photo to paper and keep it for eternity, or at least until the thermal print fades away. Now I'm going to be covering this device in a little more depth in a future video, but for now in this print mode you can press A to print straight away, or if you press select you are given an option to change the exposure of the print, or in plainer terms the darkness of your print. Finally, there's a frames option where you can choose from several normal frames for your print, or some wild frames that are larger and feature 7 different Nintendo related frames. Back in the check mode, if you are feeling creative, there are paint and stamp options. Paint gives you the tools to doodle on your photos, and a further menu is accessible by pressing the start button, which features varying thicknesses of pen, 4 different colours and 3 different speeds of the cursor. Meanwhile, Stamp mode gives you the option of a selection of fun stickers via the start button menu, which you can use to make your photos look very fun and silly indeed. Navigate all the way to the right of the stamp menu and you can even pick more types of stamp, including Pokemon and Mario stamps, as well as letters in different fonts. The shoot menu also has other useful modes to look through. Items features a self-timer mode which allows you to set a countdown before a picture is taken, while time-lapse will take a number of consecutive photos within a certain time frame, great for making some simple animations. The mysterious magic option on the shoot menu brings you to some interesting features, such as some trick lenses to make sure photos look more interesting, including horizontal and vertical mirror shots and even a zoom mode. Montage allows you to combine multiple images together to make one whole image. Panorama allows you to make images that are 4 photos wide or tall, while Gameface gives you the opportunity to take several pictures of your face, which can be used to play a special version of the Game & Watch classic Ball, but with your face on the juggler character. You'll need to shoot 4 faces first, and then you can select the doodle mode to draw or add stamps to your faces. Then you can pick the play option and begin playing this most simple of juggling games amongst others, and I'll be going deeper into this mode a bit later. There is one final option in the shoot menu, and it's just absolutely pointless and incredibly weird, and that is the run button. Selecting it will load an image of Africa with the greeting Jambo, which is Swahili for hello. However, if you keep exiting this image and going back into run over and over again, eventually you'll encounter some strange faces with doodles on with the message, "What are you running from?" It is incredibly weird and a little bit creepy, but serves no actual purpose. Once you've taken your photos and had a little fun with them, you can use the view menu to check them out. Now, album is pretty self-explanatory and gives you a thumbnail view of all of your photos, where you can select them and then use the same menu as the earlier check menu to print, add frames, paint over them and more. And it's worth mentioning that there are multiple album pages. The ones labelled A are your own photos, but as you scroll through you'll end up with the B album of built-in images, including a Pokemon image. Now, most of the B album is filled with question marks, which are actually unlockable photos, and I'll be showing you how to unlock all of them later on in this video. For some reason you can't really do anything with these images, so their purpose is just for fun, I guess. Backing up slightly, we have the show menu, where you can present your snaps in fun ways. Slideshow is a sequential presentation of your album, but if you press select on this mode's title screen, you can change between 2 pieces of music to play during your slideshow, or shuffle the order of the slideshow playback. In animation, you can play user-created sequences of photos, but you have to make an animation first, and once again I'll get to that in a short moment. You can use up and down on the D-pad to change the background music. Hotspot allows you to add interactive sounds, transitions and links to other pictures, but once again you'll actually need to make a hotspot image first, and again I'm going to show you how to do that all in a little bit. Back up to the starting menu, and the last option on this screen is play, where you can engage in some entertaining diversions. Don't expect anything too deep, but you'll be taken to a strange game called Space Fever 2, where you control a ship at the bottom of the screen and have a basic laser. This game is actually based on the 1979 Nintendo arcade game Space Fever, developed by the R&D 1 department. If you don't shoot the ships in front of you, you'll be taken straight into Space Fever 2's gameplay, and getting a high score will unlock a whole new minigame and a few of the unlockable pictures I mentioned previously. If you shoot the B ship at the beginning, you'll be taken to another Nintendo blast from the past in a version of Nintendo's Game & Watch LCD game Ball. Before you play, you can pick from 2 different pieces of background music, as well as 3 different faces. 2 are built into the system, while the 3rd is user created, which we'll get into in the advanced settings a bit later. Playing Ball is simple. You just use the left and right on the D-pad, or the A and B buttons to move the juggler's hands left and right to catch the cascading balls. Once again, high scores will unlock more hidden pictures in Album B. The D ship in Space Fever 2 takes you to DJ, a very simplistic synthesizer. You can go into New to make your own beats from scratch, but to see what is truly possible, let's take a look at one of the game's sample beats. Again, you can pick a face to act as your DJ avatar, 2 presets and 1 you can make yourself in advanced settings, and you're given a screen with your DJ spinning the wheels, and you can press A to play a sound effect whenever you want. Also, you can use the left and right on the D-pad to select various aspects of the music like tempo, the 2 sound channels, the noise channel and sound effects, and then use up and down to adjust them from changing tempo or the type of sound effect to turning the sound and noise channels on and off. Pressing start will pause and play the music, while B can be used to save your settings and quit DJ mode entirely. If you want to get a little deeper into creating, you can press select to actually edit the notes being played and the synth settings for each channel. Moving through the options with the D-pad and changing them by holding A and using the D-pad to change values, you can make a piece of music that you're proud of. So that's everything you can do with the Game Boy Camera, right? Wrong, because pressing the select button while on the starting menu will give you 4 more options to play around with. Doodle will give you the same paint and stamp options you could access when checking your photos in the shoot menu. Link will allow you to easily print and share photos with your friends, and there's also an option mode where you can select multiple photos to print out at once and use the feed margin to select the gap size between photos. The transfer menu will allow you to send and receive photos between the Game Boy Camera, and there are more unlockables for transferring photos with others, and even for receiving photos from Game Boy Cameras registered by owners of a certain gender. Going back up, and the special menu will allow you to take the hotspots we saw earlier and compose images to combine multiple photos. In Hotspot, you can pick a photo and you're given 5 slots in which you can use to add hidden spots that when clicked in Hotspot mode can make a player selected sound. And you can even make this spot take you to another photo using a particular transition. Just select one of 5 slots, choose where you want the hidden hotspot to be, and then use the menu to select your sound effect, transition and destination photo. Add up to 5 and then press B to save and quit. Now you can go back to the hotspot menu in the view mode show menu and play around with what you've made. The compose mode allows you to quickly make a quick collage using up to 4 different existing photos using the split option, or merge 2 images together using the fusion option. Once again, we return to the special menu as we enter the final menu, edit. From here you can easily delete or make copies of photos in your album, or enter the animation menu. Here it does exactly what it says on the tin. At the bottom of the screen you have some strips of film, and using the D-pad to highlight each frame you can hold A and use the D-pad to select photos from the albums at the top of the screen, then release the button to add them to the animation. Pressing select will give you a menu for looping the animation, sorting frames into normal or random order, using the pack option to remove blank frames, test to preview your animation, and clear to erase the whole thing in one go. And that's every feature and function of the Game Boy Camera in a nutshell. Well, at least all of the stuff that's in plain sight, because there is still more to this peripheral than meets the eye, including some unlockable photos and compatibility with the 64DD peripheral. But I'm going to save that one till last, as there are still a few secrets hidden within the Game Boy Camera itself that I'd like to show you. First up, it's not really a secret, but if you ever wanted to completely wipe your Game Boy Camera, simply hold start and select when turning your Game Boy on while the Game Boy Camera is inserted. However, if you just want to clear your album, enter the album option that's found in the main menu select menu, then press edit, then album. If you make sure the icon on the top left is set to delete, then hold select, start and press up. You'll get a prompt to delete all of your photos. DJ mode has a fairly odd Easter egg that occurs when you repeatedly trigger the 9th sound effect. Doing so will play the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down. You can also print a transcription of your created track using the Game Boy printer by going to the Sound 1 menu and holding Start and A together. Other cosmetic Easter eggs include the ability to change the speed of the dancing Mario image on the Game Boy Camera's title screen by pressing up on the D-pad to increase the speed and down to decrease his dancing speed. You can do the same thing in the view menu to change the speed of the weird face animation. Ball secrets are a little bit more substantial. If you get a score of 500, 700 or 1000 points, you'll unlock photos B26, B27 and B28 respectively. In a similar fashion, playing Space Fever 2 and earning 2000 points will unlock a new secret game called Run Run Run. While reaching 3000, 5000 and 7000 points will unlock photos B23, B24 and B25. Now Run 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 is a simple runner game. Finishing this game in 22 seconds or less will unlock the Game Boy Camera's True Credit mode, while finishing in less than 17 seconds to 16 seconds will unlock photos B30. As a side note, rapidly tapping the A button when beating the game will raise the flag higher, which doesn't really serve the purpose. More photos can be unlocked by simply taking photos with your camera. Taking 60 photos will unlock B17 and deleting 60 photos will unlock B18. B19 is unlocked by transferring 5 photos to other Game Boy cameras, while you'll discover photo B20 by receiving 5 photos from Game Boy cameras registered to male users, while B21 is earned by receiving 5 photos from Game Boy cameras registered to female users. Finally, printing 30 pictures with the Game Boy printer unlocks photo B22. So you know how the Game Boy camera works with the Game Boy printer? Well, it also works with another couple of peripherals, the Nintendo 64's 64DD and the N64 Transfer Pak. Mario Artist was a series of creative applications for the ill-fated disk drive add-on, where it allowed Japanese gamers to make their own artwork. Now, it's possible to import images and video through a special Nintendo 64 cartridge that utilised standard yellow, red and white composite RCA ports, but where those weren't available, you could take pictures using the Game Boy Camera, plug it into the N64 Transfer Pak and import it straight into the Mario Artist games. Mario Artist is all about drawing and editing 2D images, as well as taking photos of virtual landscapes, but we're interested in it here because it is entirely possible to import images taken with the Game Boy Camera. Just find the icon that looks like a Game Boy Camera, or Pocket Camera as it's known in Japan, and then you're given the option of importing an image already taken with the Game Boy Camera, or take a new image using the camera, importing it straight into Photo Studio in the process. Once you've selected a photo or taken your own, you can change the colour of the highlights and lowlights, and even turn on a smoothing effect to soften up those harsh low resolution images. Once imported, you can play around with these images with up to 4 people doodling on them as you see fit. But it is Mario Artist Talent Studio where the really silly stuff is. This unusual piece of software could well be seen as the precursor to Mii's, only these avatars are far more customisable and fun. You can change the clothes and appearance of these characters, then watch them do things like boxing, dancing, or being a gigantic city destroying kaiju. What's more, you can use the Game Boy Camera to import or take a picture of your face and place it onto your very own avatar. It works the very same way as importing an image into Photo Studio, only you also have to position a box around your face, eyes and nose in order to get the right dimensions for applying your 2D image to the 3D avatar model. Once your character has your face, you can give yourself a decent haircut, some makeup if you fancy it, plus some fashionable clothes before watching several predefined sequences that show your new avatar in various strange situations, like this one, or this one, or this one. It's all very ridiculous really. With real 64DD hardware, it is possible to use these avatars in other games, such as export them into the 64DD version of SimCity and have them as a resident of your town. Hold on there, because even though I've been going on for a long time, I still ain't done. Not until I at least finish up with a whole other version of the Game Boy Camera that is incredibly hard to come by. An extremely limited edition gold Game Boy Camera was available in the US through Nintendo Power magazine and features several exclusive Legend of Zelda stamps and pictures. Now, being that this version never received a widespread release, when it does appear on eBay, do not expect to get it for cheap. It's not exactly a drastically different version of the standard Game Boy Camera, but it's still interesting enough to point out here. And that's it for the Game Boy Camera. Well, not entirely, because I still have to talk about the Game Boy printer peripheral, which as mentioned earlier is able to print out the images that you've taken with the Game Boy Camera, and it can do plenty more besides. But I've been talking for way too long, so that is going to have to be a story for another time, so look out for that one very soon. Until then, if you are craving more Game Boy action, click here to check out my definitive guide to the Super Game Boy, a multi-part series covering the Super Game Boy, Super Game Boy 2 and Super Game Boy Commander. I'll be back next week with another video, but until then, thanks for watching.